one conference I had been, like most conferences, we don't sleep very much. There's a lot of conversations over smoking that some of the most important conversations kind of happen. And I had an early morning panel and just completely lost my voice. And everyone was like, wow, rough night, Natalie. And it was like a big conference with a lot of people I love and respect. And that was definitely a pretty
So they thought you smoked too much weed?
No, I think they just knew I was out partying, which I had been out late having an amazing dance party with people from around the world that I still don't regret, and some of those connections that we made that night. We're still working on people from the UK and Brazil, like collaborating on anti-racism projects or things that we met because we were dancing in that space. So I don't regret it. That was a highlight.
but you're talking about super professional conferences, right?
Yes. There are conferences that I go to a number of different conferences. The ones I go to most frequently are these kind of psychedelic research conferences that happen around the world. I was just in one in Prague before I came to Israel for ROI. And they present like the range of medical and other research about psychedelics. And
psychedelics, it's psychedelic drugs.
Psychedelic
just explain because our English level is not as yours.
Sorry. So psychedelic literally means mind manifesting. Mm-hmm. And it was a word like created in the 1950s, even though a lot of these substances we consider psychedelics have been used by people around the world for thousands of years. And they're considered, like plant medicines can be considered psychedelics, so cannabis and ayahuasca, but also things like LSD or MDMA even, or psilocybin mushrooms. So those are all kind of common examples, but it's really about this process of like mind manifestation or kind of bringing things up that are often suppressed in that process. It's different than other drugs, like maybe alcohol that can also bring things up, certainly, but also are more of a depressant.
So what do you talk about in such conferences? Like, do you take drugs together, or you just speak about what research of drugs are?
We speak about it. These conferences are like all day long. There's so much research happening, and there are people from all around the world like really excited to share because, there may not be very much research in individual countries. There are just a few people doing it. But then when we get together as a community, it's a really powerful thing, and we learn a lot. So I can speak about what we present about as MAPS. I work at MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And we work to develop medical and legal and cultural contexts for the beneficial uses of psychedelics and marijuana. But our main focus in all of that, we have a broad vision, but we're quite pinpoint focused on getting MDMA-assisted therapy approved as medicine in Israel, in the U.S., in Europe.
In Israel as well?
Yeah, we have we have studies here using MDMA therapy to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, post-trauma. Which I actually, side note, appreciate that in Israel it's called post-trauma, because in the U.S. it's often called post-traumatic stress disorder. But a lot of these responses are not super disordered. They make a lot of sense in response to trauma. So
I know what you mean.
I appreciate
that. So it's for soldiers?
Soldiers, but
who've seen things.
Most of we do a lot of work with soldiers. However, in our sessions, often the first traumas that come up as people are processing are traumas from early childhood. It's often, it's not just the trauma at war. It's often other experiences that then when you get to war, then something else happens that you're less able to respond in a resilient way. But additionally, even like in the U.S., the rates of, and I'm positive is the same in Israel. Oh, I guess there's a higher military population here, but the rates of trauma in returning war veterans are lower than rates of trauma in like PTSD in like a poor black neighborhood in Atlanta. And the rates of PTSD in transgender people or LGBTQ are incredibly high. Women have higher rates. There's interesting it seems that groups that are marginalized by society experience trauma just of existing. And I think that's something that is really powerful. There's a researcher, incredible researcher named Dr. Monica Williams, who has shown that PTSD can manifest from racism, like she calls it racial trauma. And I actually read articles about her, reached out to her to tell her about our research, and now she's hosting an MDMA therapy study focused on racial trauma or working with people of color.
Amazing.
So I'm really excited about.
Okay, so I didn't present you, but you presented yourself amazingly. Let's just give the music a second to get in.
Yeah. One time. Look. Ring the alarm. Hot ass nigga. Yeah. Big ass head so my dreams get bigger. Yeah. Big campaign strong so my flows get sicker. Yeah. Confidence bigger than a drunk ass nigga. Look.
Hey Natalie, how are you?
Doing well.
So, your full name is Natalie Leila Ginsberg?
Yep.
Nice. So where did Lila come from?
It was my grandfather's sister's name, and she passed away before I was born, and he was really close to her. And the name Lila always resonated with me a bit more. But when I was young, I, in school, asked to be called, I wrote Lila in my homework, and then the teacher would call me Lila, and I wouldn't respond. So I was like, okay, I'm Natalie, but I can, I'm Natalie Lila.
Yeah.
So.
Where are you from originally? So where did you grow up?
I grew up in New York City.
In the city?
In the city.
City? How city?
Manhattan.
How Manhattan? Like where exactly?
Upper East Side.
Upper East Side. Wow. So that was in the 80s, I guess?
I was born in 89.
So the 90s, you're so young.
Everyone
is so young. Everyone is so young.
I'm proud of that.
So the 90s. So you had some amazing years there, right? I mean, for the city. It was just after the crime rate got lowered, right? Because of the mayor, I forgot his name. That is, not everyone loves him.
You're talking about Bloomberg or Giuliani?
Bloomberg. Yeah, and Giuliani later on.
I definitely don't love him these days.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they were great years in the city for me as a young, white, privileged girl growing up with a lot of means. I went to an amazing school, and the kind of space I was in, it was amazing time, but I definitely have to say it wasn't a great time for all people in New York in that process. So that was some of the controversy around him. But I'm very grateful for my experiences growing up in New York. They definitely made me who I am and exposed me to so many different kinds of people and things, and I think gave me kind of an independence, like Tel Aviv, how you can just walk anywhere. It feels quite different than things that are really spread out and disconnected.
Do you know Louis C.K.'s part where he talks about to his girls?
It's like a pile of New York's a pile of garbage. Is that what you're going to say?
No, not this one. where he tells his kids are like whining about whatever. He has 2 daughters, and they're whining about whatever, and he's like, "You can't whine. You're white people from New York. You don't have the privilege to whine about anything. You're like in the top of the world. The only thing you could do better is to be a white man from New York. Okay, but that's it."
Let's not discount the differences between a woman's experience and men's, I totally.
Okay, and then where did you study?
For college, so after in New York, I went to school for 13 years to an all-girls school named Brearley, which was a really special
Only
school.
Girls school?
Only girls, 50 girls in a grade. And it was very kind of nerdy, intellectual, really cool. The mission statement was about developing girls of adventurous intellect and a passionate love of learning through all this stuff. So that I feel like I really loved Brearley. And then for college, I went to Yale, which was also a really incredible experience, and I met so many amazing people that I continue to meet and see that to this day around the world. All that, even just in Tel Aviv now, a mutual friend who I didn't even know super well. Now we have so many. It's just a beautiful community. And then I studied social work. Well, actually, after college and before my master's, I lived in Tel Aviv for 6 months.
Really?
Yeah, but then I went to get my master's at Columbia in social work.
You're good. You have Yale, Columbia. You're like, how does it feel? Do they respect it in Tel Aviv as much as in the States?
I don't know. It depends. I don't know about respect, but it is a really helpful unfortunately, in our world, like kind of name brand or recognition is something that people put a lot of value on. So in the work that I do, it's something that's been really useful, and I think has allowed me to kind of feel more comfortable and like doing certain things, talking about psychedelics or racial justice or different things that I felt very like
because you look serious
about.
to them and not like this. So wait a minute before we get there. As someone who's been to Yale in Columbia, how do you get the level of education and the specific skills you've learned there correlated with what you needed later on in real life?
Good question, because my approach was probably different than many others, but I don't regret it for a minute. And it really, the most valuable things from both of those experiences were the people I met and the conversations I had. And I took amazing classes and did, so many things, but Yale certainly, so kind of trusting in that. Also, like, taking the classes I was interested in, even if, my father was like, why are you taking these random classes, like, about all, to him, were like the most like niche things. Like one of my favorite seminars was called Black and Jewish Community Politics, or like Islam and the American Imagination, and these things that ended up being actually quite relevant to my work as a social worker, to different things. But so I think kind of really trusting in your intuition and your gut, like what interests you. Like school is such a special place. And granted, that also is a privilege to be able to be super open and of course, financial considerations do come in. But I really believe that, at least in the U.S. where there are liberal arts schools, you can really study anything you want in school, and it doesn't really, it opens you up still to many different things. Yeah. And I think the world appreciates having people who had studied different things and not all the same.
Yeah.
But at social work school, by far my most powerful experiences were my field placements, where my first year I worked as a therapist in a middle school in the South Bronx. So I learned an insane amount just from speaking to the kids I was working with, the teachers, commuting to work. It was an amazing experience. And that... Did
you feel safe?
I did. And that was something, my anxious Jewish father, who I love, if he's listening, would be very concerned. Like, he drove me there the first time and was like, "What, you can't walk around there, da da da." People were so fucking nice to me. Excuse, I hope I can curse on this, that, I was an hour and a half bus ride, subway ride, walk, and on the bus it would get so crowded and people would always be like, "Miss, are you a teacher, miss? Do you want to sit down?" I felt really the opposite of scared, honestly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's something about this fear we have of the unknown, and it kind of when you come in scared, then people respond who is this person in our era that's looking at, as opposed to if you feel more open. I really didn't have any bad experiences at all for the year of commuting there. So yeah, I didn't feel scared. I learned a shit ton. And I went into social work.
Do you have a specific memory from there with a specific kid or something?
So many. I would say the rates of sexual abuse were crazy, and then when you look at the numbers, it really is incredibly high. 1 in 4 women and these things. But working with 12-year-olds that were talking about stepfathers, people that are in their lives that are really these really complicated situations, really quickly helped me see how damaging it could be for the rest, how not damaging, but the way it shapes you for the rest of your life if you don't have the support or ways of processing that. And
okay, so wait, I have a hard question. If it's too much, let me know.
Sure.
So you mentioned the word privilege before 3 or 4 times, and even before we started recording, which I really respect, the fact that you don't take for granted what you have, and you really appreciate what you have, and you look at it in a very critical thinking. So you're there in South Bronx, growing up in the Upper East Side. That's this is like this is like America, right? It's like the two opposites.
I had never spent time in the South Bronx, and it's like 20 minutes
Yes.
away from the
Yeah.
Upper East Side.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you were growing up not seeing, I mean, New York is quite mixed, much more than, I don't know, Utah, but still you have your neighborhood and New York is still big and yada, yada, yada. And then sometimes the feelings that you get as someone who comes from a good neighborhood to such places can be really mixed feelings, right? Like, did you feel blame or I don't know, like you have some responsibility for it, or like how did it go?
I'm
in
really
your mind?
happy you asked that question. And I think my really big learning process of that experience, or how it made me feel, was not to blame, but more like, okay, what am I going to do about it? Like, I think I would feel guilty or feel to blame if I wasn't really thinking about how to like change things, that personally. But in that experience, like by the end of the year, I came to realize, again, like looking at who I, as you said, I'm a little white girl, Jewish girl from the Upper East Side going to the South Bronx. Like, is that my most helpful way of making change? It would be really wonderful if the kids I was working with had therapists that came from their community. That would really be even better, instead of seeing me from like someone such a different community, just a different, I don't know, and there's so much I don't know about their experiences. And I kind of realized that I had the ability to, put on my pearls and go to Washington, D.C. and talk to like Republicans and, be in a different space that other people might not have that same ability to do. And that was how I felt that, and I kind of felt inspired, also excited about that, making that kind of change, because I saw also working as with these kids, and also that summer I worked with people arrested for prostitution at an alternative sentencing court. So both of those experiences, working as therapists, I was working with people who experienced so much trauma. But I saw that like most of, to me, like this constant trauma that was creating all of it came from these really fucked up policies, or things like racism, or like the way a police officer treat, like the way they're like people were all in prison because 1 in 4 black men gets incarcerated. Just like these things really damage a child, impact a child, or have these things.
Vicious circle.
Exactly. So I kind of saw got drawn to that kind of work, and I think that's part of my feeling, like how I've dealt, like that's with my feelings. I haven't felt guilty or responsible, because I feel that I'm trying to engage. Like, what more can you do than that? You know.
And when you got home with the bus, what was your mood? Do you remember?
So it was actually, working as a therapist is very intense, as you can imagine. People are telling you about these things, so I actually thought it was really nice that I had this 1.5-hour bus ride at the end of the day. It kind of gave me this, I listened to music, I loved people watching on the subway. There's so many different people, and so that way was nice. But it definitely made it difficult for me sometimes to be as compassionate for maybe my family members, or like, I remember once I went on a date with someone who like was working at Goldman Sachs, and he was like, I had the worst, you don't know how hard my life, and I was like, my client was raped at knife point last night.
Oh my God.
Your day was fine. And I just like couldn't, and it was really a hard like
Poor
balancing.
Proportions, man.
So that was a learning process of like how to balance that. And, now I'm not working as a therapist in those ways, though I still, I'm talking to a lot of people in intense conversations, but recognizing how that impacts you is really important. So I think kind of self-care and taking care of your mental health is really important. And I'm saying this because this is something that I've been really conscious of in Tel Aviv this trip. That I love this city a lot. I've been really lucky to, I think this is my 7th trip in the last few years. But recognizing that I feel like there is, similar to New York, absolutely, that this like working hard, playing hard, this like not sleeping, like just going being in this level of intensity that feels like, like maybe I've just been spending a lot of time in California, but this trip I'm like, like people should breathe more. Like, well, how would that impact things in Israel, like just in general? I mean, everywhere in the world this applies, but I think I've just, this idea of self-care is something that I learned at social work school, and it's really radical, more radical than it sounds. Like that, like self-care is like about self-preservation and also about determining like where you want to create from. Like if we're creating and making things from this like hurried, frantic, fearful space, we're closed-minded, we're doing things that keep making more problems because we're not open. But if we can be creating and building from a compassionate, like loving, visionary kind of space where we slept and, went to swim in the ocean and then we're so much more open to flow and collaboration and building in a way that I think is more sustainable.
Yeah. And it's even harder because we're in the age of FOMO, right? And on Instagram, it seems like everyone is doing something. So people, please, more photos of you sleeping or just on the couch. It'll help me. So field work was amazing at uni, and then what did you go to do?
So the last leg of field work that I did was working at the Drug Policy Alliance because kind of that work in the schools and in the prison system kind of showed me how mass incarceration and all this imprisonment in the U.S. is really driven by drug policy focused on like people of color. Basically, there was like this very racist implementation, drug laws, and I'm a history major at Yale, and I was like looking back at the history, I was like, this is so blatantly racist. The people making the laws said things like, marijuana makes white women want to sleep with Negroes, and that's why we need to make this illegal, and the Mexicans, and like it's very blatant. So kind of following that, the Drug Policy Alliance works to legalize marijuana around the country and also change other drug laws around drugs that are more harmful than helpful. And they promote making drug laws based in in research and in public health rather than criminalization and punishment.
Yeah.
And so I was working there, and then I was working on a campaign about like arrests, the disparity between black and white arrests in marijuana. And then they put me on the medical cannabis campaign. And I'd always enjoyed smoking cannabis, but didn't, and thought, sure, if it helps people as medicine, why not? But I never really understood the insane medical potential that it had until I was just put on this this campaign. It was a campaign where we actually ended up legalizing medical cannabis in the state of New York this year, which was a really amazing experience as like a policy fellow there. And I met so many amazing people, parents, mothers of children with epilepsy, people with multiple MS, who were saying their lives were completely transformed by this medicine. So that really started like opening my mind in certain ways, and then I started reading about MAPS's research, this psychedelic research that psychedelic therapy could help things like PTSD and depression and addiction and all these things that I had been taught were like different mental, brain imbalance, chemical imbalances.
Yeah.
And I was seeing that one thing with 1 or 2 sessions, instead of taking something every day, was able to really transform something. So something kind of resonated with me that like it must be really addressing kind of the core of the issue and not the symptom.
Yeah. So wait, before you continue,
Sure.
about that. So you're getting into great research. You see live examples. And you're starting to spend most of your time doing this, okay? What's I have to ask, you don't have to answer. What's the opinion of your father?
Good question. Well, my father is an investment banker, worked on Wall Street, had very different, kind of political views than I do in certain ways. So it's been a really kind of fun and interesting learning process. He, at first didn't really understand social work school or like why that was something that I wanted to do. But in recent years, he really has, and it's been a really cool thing to even he's like, I recognize like that you really are a great therapist. Like he's seen that. He's like, I see why you did that. Or, But in the drug space, even like, bless my parents because it's not the easiest thing to explain. What does your daughter do?
Yeah.
She works at a psychedelic research organization doing policy, Like it's hard for me to even explain. So that's been a funny process for them. And when I started working at MAPS 4 years ago, it was less.
MAPS, I just say it's the organization for the
Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. MAPS, which is the oldest, it's like a over 30 years old organization dedicated to psychedelic research.
Okay. So go on. So you started
working there, and my parents were like a little like, what is, like each thing. When I was working at Drug Policy Alliance, they're like, on marijuana, they're like, this is interesting, because this was just when marijuana first was legalized. It was kind of like the earlier part.
Yeah.
They're like, this is interesting, but I can understand with, the racial injustice and the incarceration. But then the psychedelics are like, wait, what? And because I also had actually never had psychedelic experiences besides cannabis before I started working at MAPS, which was really, people were like so confused. Like, I think that I was like kind of a, I don't know, it was just a funny, like,
it's this kind of thing that people just simplify too much, right? Like when you say legalize drugs, people think, oh, it means that we all will be able to have drugs, and it's for us, it's for the common people. They less see, okay, it's for medical, it's for people with PTSD, with post-trauma, blah, 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 blah. People turn to, I think the more provocative the subject is, the more people tend to simplify things and reduce them to the way that it's really hard to defend yourself.
Absolutely. And that's definitely what psychedelics have suffered from. But I will say these last few years, as we've published more research and we've getting farther along, media has really changed. And that's even like back to my parents has changed a lot of their responses too. Like now, they're seeing New York Times, Wall Street Journal, like this is the cutting edge of mental health. And, I was quoted in the New York Times. I go to the UN, I fly around the world.
You were quoted in the New York Times.
It was.
That's nice.
For my parents, like you ask what my parents think, like that, they're like, oh, okay, maybe this is like these things. I think fun. It helps give it, like I understand when I don't know that they previously fully understood some of the work.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little, strange at first, but now they both have grown to really appreciate it. And my father, like I said something about considering a PhD, and my father was like, "Why would you leave MAPS? This is the most amazing work." I was like, "Oh wow, yeah."
Okay, so you were stopping where you worked for the Association of Drugs Policy.
Drug Policy Alliance.
Oh, it's so hard.
That was close.
Okay, why do you always have this long titles for this organization?
Well, so we call it just DPA, MAPS.
Yeah.
Like, you shorten it.
Yeah, you have to make a brand. So you work there as what?
A policy fellow. So it was my second year of my master's. And then when I finished with that experience was when I started with MAPS.
So what did you do every day, like in the morning? What did you really do? Okay, you had your coffee and then...
So many things, which is what I liked about it. My first day on the job, they said, get in the car, we're meeting at 6 a.m. and going to Albany, which is the capital of New York. And we went and we saw this bill on decriminalizing marijuana in small amounts had passed through one of the assemblies. So I was like, this is fucking awesome. First day, we're passing legislation. You go up with groups of people who are all different, people who are impacted by the laws. So a lot of different drug users or people who are incarcerated. So it's an amazing group of people. So even as you're going to Albany and talking to politicians, I'm learning more from the people that are going with than from even the politicians. Yeah. So that would be one day. Another day, I'd be in the office reading lots of articles about what's going on and compiling them. And we would make binders to give to the, to people we were meeting with of all different information.
So it's kind of maybe something a lobbyist is doing, right?
Yeah, I was lobbying.
Simplifying it for the politicians, so...
Exactly.
Okay.
But then I'd also be, one day I spent at a court in Brooklyn where people were coming who had been arrested for marijuana. And I was working with someone who was served 20 years in prison. He and I were speaking to people what was your experience with the arrest? Do you want to tell us your story? Because we were trying to document stories of improper arrests and things. So that was just a very cool experience to have.
So what was his story? Do you remember?
I don't exactly, but I don't exactly.
So he was arrested
it was drugs,
for 20 years?
A non-violent drug offense. Non-violent drug offense.
And he got 20 years?
Yeah. The U.S. this is why I got into this work. Our prison system is insane. We incarcerate more people than any other country in the world by far, Russia, anything. And it's very disproportionately focused on people of color. And it's really sick, and it's for biggest driver is nonviolent drugs. You have more people in prison
than in Russia and other countries?
Proportionally, yep.
So that's a good brand. America has a good brand.
Yeah.
I would never imagine this.
It's like 1/5 of the, it's
crazy.
It's not something I'm proud of, but we have private prison systems. So the prison lobbies are very strong, and they actually oppose a lot of our attempts to change drug laws, because if we change drug laws, they have fewer people in their prison, so they get paid less. Oh my God!
So now someone has a good interest, like economical interest, in having more prisoners.
Yeah, you may have seen the kids detained at the borders in Mexico. That's also a business, the private detentions. But I mean, in Israel, occupation, military is a business too, and there's a huge interest in moving that forward.
Yeah.
Same shit, unfortunately.
Okay, so you work there, and then from there, how did you get to MAPS?
So my time there, I was still like, I miss being a therapist, but policy is important. I feel like I should be doing this work. And then, so I reached out. MAPS work was so interesting because I thought it was about kind of individual therapy, but it had such like political implications. Like, if psychedelics are better medicine in one session than a pharma is, like, what does this say about all of our systems, about our approach to health, about our focus on symptoms instead of the root cause? So I got just really excited about like all of that stuff, and reached out to try to work with them, and they're like, we don't have any, no jobs open, but you can do this non-paid thing on the side that's like, I got to watch videotapes of MDMA sessions, therapy sessions, and like to see if the therapist was adhering to a protocol. But so I got to watch these sessions, but I was like, I needed a real job. I just graduated.
Wait, how does it happen? Like, so the patient has to take the drug before the therapy or during?
I would love to. I can talk through the whole process of our MDMA. It's a protocol of MDMA assisted psychotherapy.
MDMA is like what you used to call ecstasy, right?
It's a part of ecstasy, but often ecstasy is cut with like amphetamines and speed and things. Like if you feel really jittery, or like the most of the MDMA or ecstasy people have, it's not pure MDMA.
Okay.
So I think it is important that people use substances like ketamine or these white powders to test the drugs, to find their kits online. You can order. Yeah,
but still, for the public, it's known as party drug.
Yes.
Totally party drug.
Yes, though it actually was developed as a therapy. Like it first was used in therapy in the 1970s before it was ever made illegal. It was used in couples therapy and depression.
In couples therapy, they took MDMA.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yep. And then someone brilliant, it was still legal, and someone was like, we should call it ecstasy. It was called Atom first, when it was, and they're like, we should call it ecstasy in the 80s and target the club scene in Dallas. Yeah. And then that just made it like... UK. Yeah, well, first it started in Dallas. This was like its big, I don't know, that's the story that I know, and then it grew from there very quickly, and that was right when the war on drugs in the U.S. was escalating with Ronald Reagan, just say no. So we're like, what is this scary drug coming? We have to make it illegal and go to the UN and make sure everyone else makes it illegal, even though there's no research and no one else, like none of the experts recommended that they should make it illegal, but the U.S.,
Really?
They had first, when the U.S. tried to schedule it, my boss actually organized a group of researchers, priests, rabbis, therapists, all of these people who came together to testify over this 2-year process, all the reasons it should not be made illegal, or at least Schedule 1, which means no medical use, like highly, highly dangerous. And there was this 2-year process, and the judge from the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency in the U.S., ruled that it shouldn't be Schedule 1. And then the head of the DEA just said, too bad, we're making it Schedule 1 anyway.
Because probably he got a phone call from someone in the government.
Probably. And then the same thing happened at the UN, where they literally were like looking at research that was with a different drug, MDA, in rats in really high doses, and they're like, this is dangerous. And then the chair of the drug committee said we shouldn't, there isn't enough evidence to schedule it on, but they just were like, wait, went ahead.
So what do you think, having working around this area for so long, what do you think makes people so scared of drugs? And I mean conservative people looking at drugs and just saying, hey, that should be illegal, okay? Why this? Because it wasn't just Reagan's thought, right? I mean, people agreed with him. People felt that it's scary for some reason. What is it? What in it makes it so?
So I'm glad you asked. So that was all part of a plan in the U.S., for example. Like when it was first criminalized, there were these movies called Reefer Madness, and they wrote these stories about the horrors of marijuana kills and marijuana, and so there was a very intentional campaign from the 30s. The Mexicans and their marijuana are coming, and the first drug that was made illegal was opium. When Chinese people were using it, all these Chinese men are raping our women using opium. So there was always that space, and we don't have the same fear around alcohol and tobacco. Tobacco kills more people than all other drugs combined. Alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs, most violent inducing, rape, and but we don't have fear of those drugs. So it's really about how the governments and systems have kind of presented them to us. Though I will say, of course, there's a fear around, dying or being injured, but same with alcohol, you can die immediately from drinking in the same way. But I would say with psychedelics in particular, there's another fear that I see that I think makes a lot of sense, that is that it really opens you up to stuff and kind of can make you face things, and sometimes you don't really have the space or ability to deal and look at some of those things, so it can be really a difficult experience. So I think there's something it's really important to hold them with a lot of respect and intention, and partying with psychedelics is also really wonderful. And I think there's ways of partying even with intention. Like, when not just I'm taking it to get super fucked up tonight and drinking alcohol and da-da-da. Like if you say, I'm, take it and have a really beautiful, loving, dancing night and meet people, dancing is, in music, are some of the most healing, amazing things there are. Yeah. But again, it's that intention, yeah. And and psychedelics, if you're in a bad place where something comes up, it can be really, really traumatic and hard to not have the safe space to process something, and there's reason to be afraid of that,
Okay, so you wanted a job. They said no, but you can do this thing when you're on your spare time that you don't have.
Right. So I was it was over kind of the summer, so I was I'll start doing this thing, but I need a job, and when I find a job, I'm not gonna, be able to do this thing.
Yeah.
And then luckily they reached back out, actually we're looking at your resume, and Rick, our founder, needs help working on marijuana policy stuff. And we see you just were doing actually marijuana policy, and also you could help with therapy of this. So I was amazing. So I got really lucky. I went and met with Rick. I had a really nice 2-hour walk with his dogs in the woods in Massachusetts. And then I moved to California, or actually I'd already moved to California.
So you got a job?
I got a job. Yeah, and that was 4 years ago. And since then, I've been really lucky because most of MAPS has really been focused on the research. And we also have, a team that does kind of our social media and media work. But besides Rick, who does everything, there hadn't been someone before working on policy. So it gave me a really cool opportunity to kind of build what would mean to do psychedelic policy, because even at Drug Policy Alliance, it was just starting to talk about that. It was kind of on the periphery, and so a lot of my work these last few years has been trying to kind of bridge the conversation between the psychedelic research world and this kind of broader drug policy and justice kind of.
So it's between what's going on in the science world and the legal, right?
Yes.
But how can you, Natalie, from from NYC, how can you affect the law? Isn't the law this big, amazing thing that happens somewhere and God decides on it, or really important?
Well, that's what lobbying is about. And the U.S. has a system where you literally can walk into any senator or congressman's office, both in your state or in D.C. You have to walk through a metal detector, but that's really it. And you can't necessarily get a meeting with them, but you can meet with their staffers. You can, like, have, you know, presence. And, like, it takes time and effort and a lot of networking and strategy and meeting with different people. Like, okay, so how do you change a lot? You develop relationships with people, staffers often that care a lot about the issue, working with different senators who come to us because we have the information. When they're working on marijuana research policy, like, we're the experts. Like, my boss has been doing this for 30 years. He knows every detail. Like, we're educating them. So we work with them in that way. And we make suggestions about what would help. We talk to, like, different sides because, like, you know, sometimes they can't, like, a Republican and Democrat might not talk together, but they would both talk to us about research. We do a lot of media interviews, like, because people are excited about psychedelics, and we talk about marijuana. We talk about policy and the barriers that we're facing in our research. At the UN this year, the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, it's called. It meets every year in Vienna. We hosted a side event, it's called, with the government of the Czech Republic. And it was all about research with psychedelics that's been going on. And it was almost all people from different delegations in the room asking questions, learning. So a lot of it, on the psychedelic policy front, it's definitely the earlier stages of, like, changing law. It's, like, more kind of opening people, helping them understand as the medical process is moving forward.
Yeah.
And then the medical process will change law because in the U.S., if something is deemed medical use, then it's not Schedule 1 anymore, which is, like, the most criminalized space.
Okay, so if they have to prove, right? What's the name of the... There's this
FDA?
test. Yeah, FDA.
It's like a multi-year, like, research. But the FDA is our system that determines what's a medicine.
And if they go through this test, amount of FDA 1, 2, 3, I can't remember.
There are 3 phases. So we're just started phase 3 of our research.
You're starting phase 3, so it's almost there.
We're almost 2021. We're going to have approval. And Israel, too. People are very supportive here. I, like, met with the Ministry of Health here. They're very open and wanting to learn and more supportive than the U.S. government.
So if it passes FDA 3, it's now considered medical. So the FDA, which is the Federation for
the Food and Drug Administration.
Food and Drug Administration. Oh, it's so hard. So Food and Drug Administration says that MDMA is great for therapy, for PTSD or whatever. Does it has to say the purposes of the therapy?
So it's not like anyone can just get it now. Like, it is going to be a system, at least at the beginning, where only, like, certain therapists would be able to administer it. But that's only for, like, 5 years as people are kind of learning. And it will require having, like, one person with a medical license. And it's like you take the MDMA with the therapist. You don't go home.
Exactly. So you have to tell me how it looks in the therapy itself.
Yes. Okay, so... There's one participant and 2 therapists usually, although we also have a couples study, but that's an aside. I'll talk about that later. But so one, and usually it's a male and a female, not always, but there's a sense of trying to have some kind of, like, energetic balance. And first, the person will have a few sessions, like getting to know the therapist, talking about the trauma, preparing for the session. And then the day of the session with medicine, they're in a really comfortable room with, like, a couch with, like, pillows, and they have an eye shade and ear headphones to listen to music. And the person is given the medicine, the MDMA, and they take it from, you know, like a bowl. It's kind of a bit of a ceremonial process, and then they're invited to lie down, close their eyes, and go inside if they want to put the eye shades or the music on. And usually the first, like, kind of hour or even more, sometimes people are just kind of lying there and seeing what's coming up. And it's really cool in the videos. Like, sometimes people are totally still, but sometimes people are, like, moving, a lot of time moving their body, releasing things, dancing, like, and And then after, a bit of time, they'll like sit up and like take off their earphones and like, say, I have something to say. And the therapists really focus on creating like a safe container for the person to lead the process. Like it's not about directing the person. It's about really trusting what's coming up from you. You know better than anything else. Try to listen to yourself. Let whatever comes up is meant to come up. Talk through it, like, and trust that. And that's like a really
So they don't give them any context? Like, let's talk about your childhood, your mom, your...
So they say, like, if, like, towards the middle of the session, nothing that seems like is really about the trauma is coming up, they'll say, do I have permission to bring it up?
So they know ahead of time what is the trauma?
Yeah, they've had a few sessions where they talk about things. But they say almost never does that happen. Usually people know why they're there and it like comes up. But the thing is that, they know about the trauma, but they might not know about the other trauma that comes up. And often there's a lot of other trauma that comes up that no one had really realized, even the person themselves may often forgot.
Yeah.
Like maybe,
so it could be an earlier trauma usually.
Yeah, and that is a lot of what comes up.
So that's why you mentioned before, like people who had post-trauma from war, but actually it happened because the first trauma was earlier in their lives when they were kids or something.
Yeah.
And then when do you see the results of the therapy? Like what is being tested?
So we're testing the improvement of post-trauma, depression, and a few other scales. So and then I guess to finish the protocol of it. So you have this process where people are really having these like amazing, like honestly when I was watching the videos I'd want to write down the quotes. They would just say these like beautiful like philosophical like love is everything, but not that cheesy, like actually really brilliant and insightful. But that love it, that sentence is too, but and after the end of the process they come down, they have a dinner, and then they spend the night actually in the clinic.
Wow.
And then they wake up in the morning and have another session. And I say this because I know a lot of people like say to me, MD is great and all, but I feel like shit the next day, like da-da-da. And with our patients, or participants, it's really not like that. Yeah. And I see a lot of people taking MD with like alcohol and partying and not sleeping, and then it's also the MD is cut with like speed and other stuff. Yeah. So but we like take a lot of care to make sure the person's rested, has space to process, eats well.
So they go to sleep with MD?
No, I mean, it only lasts for 4 to 6 hours. So it's like after the MD's over, they eat dinner, then they go to sleep.
So why doing another therapy in the morning?
Kind of to integrate. So this word integration, I think, is really important. And it's the idea that whatever happens in the session, the most important part is like how you can apply that to your life. It's like if you have this like new vision on life from the session, how does that vision then inform all of the other things you're doing that might not be serving you?
It sounds like a great idea that you should have in any session, in any therapy.
Absolutely.
Like, even without drugs.
100%. So that's like this grounding, this like, you're sending you off, but then there also are continual other sessions, like a few other sessions. And it kind of alternates between the individual, and then there are 3 sessions with MDMA. That's our protocol right now. Yeah. And then we've had incredible results compared to like any other treatment for PTSD.
And how do you know that the results are due to the drug involvements?
That's the point of the like FDA clinical trials, is like they develop these randomized control trials to try to demonstrate that.
So some of them would take placebo?
Yeah, so fortunately we had a process where the people who received placebo had the ability to do the real medicine after, because we thought it was like unfair, So it was, and it was cool. But also with the placebo, we saw some of our therapists were so amazing, and this process is amazing, and totally saw improvement, but was nowhere near the same improvement. Okay. And across different therapists and different things. But that's the point of this phase 3 study, is to confirm that once and for all. But the FDA has a lot of faith in us. They gave us breakthrough therapy designation, which is like a rare designation they give to drugs that it's like you have a lot of promise, and we have this high safety profile, and like they're like helping us get it like working with us to get it to approval. So we're feeling really optimistic on that front.
Did the Trump thingy had any implications of this whole movement?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, it has implications. But I think we've been, I think most people would be surprised how it's like been not helpful, but like not that harmful for the most part. The most harmful part has been that Jeff Sessions, our Attorney General, hates marijuana with such passion that he's just blocking the research in this really unreasonable way. But beyond that, there are more Republicans than you think like marijuana and are interested in psychedelics, and we have support from kind of a very wide range of people that has surprised some people, and it's something that's really been a kind of difficult, interesting experience for me to balance that, because one of the most beautiful things of this work is that it touches such a wide range of people. Marijuana in particular is one of the most bipartisan things I've ever seen in my life, from every group of people around the world, every strata of society, same in the U.S. And psychedelics too are we have supporters who are incredibly right-wing and incredibly left-wing and everywhere in between. And so in that way, there's a lot of people, it doesn't feel I feel not as threatened by the Trump government on this specific research, but the rest of what they're doing is so damaging and causing so much trauma that I feel very threatened. It doesn't mean that's all great. It's okay, I think this little thing, not little, but this piece of the puzzle is not, I think there's opportunity for us right now. So there's a lot of that. It's I think we have rare opportunities that other issues don't have right now. So I think it's important that we're engaging with that. But it's really difficult, and just on a personal level, it's definitely, a disheartening time in the world, being in Israel right now too, with the votes going on it's an intense time in the world. I think that's where I come back to the self-care and also to the psychedelic therapy and the need for this work, because that really is about getting to this place of compassion and moving from this space of fear and creating a different kind of way of being in the world and doing things in the world, because I think a lot of what we're doing right now is, well, we also are doing a lot of amazing things.
Okay, so I'll take us to a lighter conversation. Natalie, let's say we're now in a party, okay? Not a dancing party. I met you in the street. How do you introduce yourself to people? What do you say? I'm Natalie and I'm laughing because my colleague who I work most closely with, we always laugh when someone's what do you do? Our response is where do we begin? Because the cool part of it, I think, is that I like to respond based on who I'm speaking to, because I do so many different things that can be framed so many different ways. So if I'm at, a festival, say I work at a psychedelic research organization. If I'm at a PTSD conference, I say I work at I do research with PTSD and we use psychedelic medicine, or I work at in public health law. But often I don't hide what I do, because it's really, I love educating people through just saying what I do is an education to people, which I really think is cool. And did you bump into people who were impolite about what you do?
A few people, but most people are pretty open-minded when you can meet them where they are, and I think that's the cool thing about that approach. If someone works with addiction, I talk about we work with trauma and addiction, and it's really helpful because it works this way, which is something they understand. So they'd be oh, I didn't know it did that, or that sometimes that people are most resistant, though, are often people who are in recovery from addiction, and who are dedicated to this idea of clean sobriety from any kind of drugs. So I think there's this feeling of no, I can't even be open to the fact that any drug could be good, because it's drugs are bad.
They've seen the dark side.
Yeah, and I can understand that. But I also know that unfortunately this approach of what we call abstinence only, or not using any drugs, is unfortunately not effective for recovery from addiction. And there's, AA has a 70% failure rate, and I put failure in air quotes. There's their definition of failure is that you drink again. And I was working as a social worker, we would talk about how if you're crossing a bridge somewhere and you stumble in the middle, by having a drink or something, you don't have to go back to the beginning. You're still in the middle of the bridge and you stumbled, so you get up and you keep walking. That's like part of your journey.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And getting back to a point that you mentioned before, but before we started recording, you said, well, it's easier for me to deal with these things, maybe because I'm privileged and people respect me a little bit more because so I think the starting point, speaking with you, or let's imagine I now have to write your bio to introduce this podcast episode, right? So for me, saying that you've studied in Yale and Columbia, originally from New York, already give this status that let people be more patient and listening and open, as unfortunate as it is.
Yeah.
So do you see it as a tool or as a power that you're using?
Definitely. I do see that it allows people to be more open to some of the crazy, what they may think are crazy things that I'm saying. Not always, but really a lot of the time, I do think it's a powerful tool in that way. Yeah. I don't know much more to say. And I guess the other thing is my title, at MAPS, I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy. And I think policy work also kind of has this way, when you can kind of have a conversation with someone else in that realm, there's this, if you can meet, because then you can meet and explain, when you talk about drug policy, most people who work in policy don't actually understand about drug policy, and then you just educate them for 1 minute and they're like, oh, and all of a sudden they can connect it.
Do you still have the patience to educate everyone you meet?
It's a really good question. There's yes and no, because it's my I just can't help myself, but at the same time, so many people are interested in this stuff, whether it is at a party or at a conference, that I find myself talking about it so much of the time that I'm okay, maybe I need to but I do continue to mostly have patience. And I do love speaking about it because it's different to every person I'm talking to. So that's
you need a fake profile for Plan B, when you're too tired. Yeah, I'm a blogger. I say mental health policy or something like that. Okay, so we got to the end of our time, unfortunately, because I had too many other questions to ask you, but we're coming to the end of the hour. And I have a question that I'm asking everyone, so I'll ask you as well. And so imagine you're on an airplane. When is your flight back home?
On Thursday.
On Thursday. Okay, so maybe it's a bit timing for this question, but I'll ask it. Imagine you're on an airplane and then the pilot says, sorry guys, we're gonna bump into Earth soon. You have 3 minutes. And then you now have 3 minutes to think. And so what is the one thing you wish you had done before, but you didn't?
Honestly, I'm very lucky to live my life in a way that allows me to do a lot of the crazy things that I dream of like that, because I don't want to be in that position where fuck, I want to do all these things. But I'm trying, honestly, at this point in my life, it comes to more personal things of wanting to have a family, and that's what would come
That's,
to
by
my
the way,
mind.
50% of the answers
Really?
here, so it's it's totally fine to go there. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you.
I'm so happy I had an hour of your time before you fly back. And if you have interesting links, I'll put this in with the bio, so people can read more and educate themselves more about this very sometimes provocative, sometimes sensitive issues. So thank you again so much.
Thank you.
I had a lot of pleasure. And thank you, Rise, for hosting me in their amazing podcast room. Rise is an accelerator with Barclays. They have an accelerator for fintech startups, and they're always so kind to give me the podcast room. So thank you also, Rise, and see you again, guys, next week.
Like my dick is hit it when they mention. Did you get my mentions? Question: do you even fuck with a nigga like me? Will you want me in about 3 days? Really? IDC. Cause every time a nigga talk, they can't see the big up picture. Fuck your filter. Me can't go run, but me can't repeat. No.